Welcome to another episode of Run with Julia. And I'm so delighted this morning. I'm with Mark Kleanthous, and we met in 2009. We met in a hotel in London. Mark will tell you all about his life from way back. The reason we met at a hotel in London was I had a podcast series then called, I think it was called Running to Learn. I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Anyway, he was one of my most favorite guests of all time, of all of the listeners, of everybody, because he had people in hysterics telling them how he trained for his first London marathon in a suit. We might have to tell the story again, Mark. But Mark is an incredible athlete. He's done multiple marathons, multiple Ironman. He's done double, he's done triple Ironman. I mean, I can't even think of it. And he's an amazing coach. He coaches all abilities, all ages, and helps them achieve their dreams, really, Mark, don't you? So please, first of all, can we welcome to Run with Julia.
Thank you for the brief summary of my last 40 years. Thank you very much.
We decided I'm slightly Mark's big sister. I'm 2 years older than Mark. Mark's 2 years younger than me. We're saying we're young. How young are we? But that meeting in London in 2009, yeah, we met. Who chose the hotel? I remember me.
No, I chose the hotel because I think it was where it was a lunchtime. I had a lunch break, and you were fairly close by, and it was easy for both to get to. I did my research, found a nice quiet meeting room with bookshelves and everything. And I thought it'd be a nice calming area to talk about stay calm when you're running.
Yes. That was it. Yes, because I'm sure my podcast series was Running to Learn, the same name as my book, wasn't it? I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
But you did have the listeners in hysterics, because I think briefly, before we cover other areas, that the first marathon you trained for, when you trained for it in your suit to hide the fact you were training from your brother.
Yes, it was. Yeah. So brotherly love, brotherly competition. My brother was always much fitter and faster than me. Just naturally, but he was a younger brother. If it was the older brother, it would have been okay. But younger brother, no, you can't have your younger brother beating you. And yeah, so he just played football, and he was just naturally talented. And he could always beat me, no matter how much I trained, really. So we first heard about the London Marathon in 1980. It was 81 was the first marathon, so it was 6 months before. So we sort of talked about it, and then I entered it, but I didn't tell him I'd entered it. And then there was 10,000 places available, and only 8,900 applied. So I got my place. So I thought, it's come in the post. Well, he hasn't mentioned it. I'm not going to mention it to him. So I used to go out training and go to work in my suit and come back in my suit. And I didn't want him to know. We were both living at home at the time. I didn't want him to know that I was training for the marathon. So I used to go out running with my suit. And this was before the first London Marathon, remember? So this was between end of 1980 and March 81.
So you were about 20, Mark, when then?
Yes. And the number of people that used to, because I was running as hard as I could. I wasn't particularly running fast at that stage, but I was working hard, and there was no bus in front. I wasn't trying to get a bus or a train. And the number of people that used to stop and say, "Do you need a lift? You look like you're in a rush." It was hilarious.
Do you know, I've had that running barefoot, because as you know, I have done barefoot running as well. And if I'm out running, I've been asked if I need help. It looks like I'm running away, I think. I've been asked if I have police have asked me if I need help. People have stopped their cars and said, do I need some help? Because I look like I'm fleeing, I think.
Yes, I can appreciate that. But it still happened after 1981, really. And some years, well, most years that I have not run in the London Marathon, I've always gone out on London Marathon Day. And whether it's 3K, 5K, 10K, whatever, it doesn't really matter the distance, depending how fit I am. I try and replicate the speed that I actually ran in my New Balance shoes back in 1981. So sometimes
Tell us, what did you run the first?
Officially, unofficially, what's the score, really? well, back then it was a gun time. Literally, the gun went off. And it took me 6 minutes to get across the start line because I wasn't a member of a running club. I didn't have a predicted time. I thought 4 or 5 hours. And I only ran up to 10 miles, and
In
I
pursuit.
ran 3:02 for the marathon, the official time, but my watch time on my little Timex watch was something like 2:57.
Very good. Do you know, I didn't run the first one. I had a place in the first one, and for some reason, I'm not sure why I didn't run, but I ran in 1982 was my first run, and I ran. Now again, it was gun. It's got to be gun time then.
Yes, it was gun time. There was no.
I ran 3:02 on my gun time. Isn't that funny?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that
So
is funny, isn't
yeah,
it?
a first gun time. I didn't know that. That's a new fact about us, then, isn't it? What did it?
Yeah,
What did
yeah.
you want to run? What was your best marathon?
My best marathon was 2 hours 24 minutes 40 seconds, including stop to kiss my girlfriend, now my wife Claire, at sort of 22 miles.
Oh, very good.
And because I was, I was hoping to do a good time, but go back the following year and run a faster time. I didn't want to be distracted by where she might be and things. And in 82, I actually was a marshal. And I remember a distinct area on the course where there was these salt bins, the yellow bright, you couldn't miss them. There were
Yeah.
almost, back then they were as big as cars. Now they're quite small really, but they're absolutely yellow, and there was no one really standing behind them or next to them for some reason. I'm not sure why, but the rest of it was 4 or 5 people deep. So I asked Claire at the time to stand right next to this salt bin, and as I came along the embankment, I could see it. But what I hadn't anticipated was we were all on the right-hand side of the dual carriageway, and there was like a little pavement in the middle.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I remember.
And so I had to jump over well, not jump, but it felt like a jump. But at 22 miles, it felt like this big. Jump over and run over and give her a quick kiss, and then off I went, you see. Bring on. And I was, so I was running with Ingrid Christensen, and there was TV.
What year was this then?
I never really got going that year in 84 after that, but
84. And was Ingrid Christensen running alongside you at the time?
well, yes, right next to me, yeah, because back then it was a mass start, really.
Yes, it was. I remember that. My best, all those 80s. We were probably running in the same marathons then, Mark, because
yes, I'm sure.
I ran quite a few in 80, in the
Right.
80s. I can't remember. I remember 82 because that was my first one. I remember 86 because it was my fastest. I can't remember much of the others.
Yeah, so you started a year later than me, and you peaked 2 years later than me. So that sort of.
But I'd gone. I didn't stay the same pace as you though. You'd zoomed.
But going back to at school when I was 10, we used to run around a full school field, and it was really cold, and I sort of can't remember because it was a long time ago, but I finished last a couple of times. Yeah. And my sports teacher said, "Mark, you never run a marathon." So I thought, well, I've just run around this field 2 or 3 times. That feels like a marathon. I know I can run a marathon, but I never knew it was 26 miles. There was no London Marathon back in the 1970s.
No.
So and it was really weird in the first London Marathon. It was wet, it was cold. I got to about almost a similar spot where I kissed my wife in 84, and I was really tired. I wanted to walk, and there wasn't a lot of crowds the first year, but the crowds were quite enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And I just about to stop, and I saw my brother, and I sort of stopped, and I gave him a cuddle, and he said, "Go on, Mark, you can do it." And I still didn't believe I could run another 4 miles because I was digging deep for probably an hour already.
Yes.
And then I had this sort of really weird moment where I remember my teacher, and during the training entering, I completely forgot about what my teacher said. And I remember him saying, "Mark, you never ran a marathon." And it didn't give me superpower, but it allowed me to run to the finish line. Yeah. And back in 1981, I still remember it now, it gets goose pimples, remembering the track, the signature tune, theme tune. Yeah. It was like a cross country. It was finished. It was just taped. It was a single tape.
I remember. Yes.
That went on for quite a way. Just a single. The second year and the third year, it was a 2 or 3 tunnel. So they got runners through, got a back marker, and then they're allowed to queue up, and it was just a single funnel.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, there's a chap in front of me staggering. He's not going to make it. And thinking, shall I help him? Shall I not help him? If I help him, I might not finish. I might collapse. I was in a terrible state. And although I paced myself, I just hadn't done the miles.
Not mileage, no.
And I thought, right, I'm going to help him because he's not going to make it. You know, he was zigzag and everyone else was running by. And I was just about to grab him, and he just suddenly manages to take about 8 steps to the funnel. And I ran, I was trying, because at that stage I was trying to save him from falling over. I finished just behind him, and we just landed flat on the floor. And then suddenly all these helpers, first aiders came, because we were probably the first people that needed some help, just after 3 hours. And then the BBC film cameras came on and sort of filmed us, and then they panned away because they were worrying it was a heart attack or
they didn't want to put people off.
and a lot of my work friends, back then there was no VHS recorders. You couldn't iPlay, you couldn't play it back. And a lot of my friends, I saw you finish, you staggered across the finish line, a chap crossing collapsed in front of you. I never saw it. Well, anyway, during COVID, they had the when the marathon wasn't on, they were showing the highlights. And they showed this little clip of this chap staggering. And I'm watching it thinking, wow, that looks like the chap that I nearly caught up. And then I come into frame and I'm also staggering. And we just literally crossed the finish line, and then they cut it. They didn't show us falling over. And it just brought back so many memories of that.
Yeah. So did you have ambition? I mean, you trained for the marathon, but did you have the ambition to be an athlete for your life? I mean,
no, it was just enter the marathon because my brother was going to enter the marathon. It turns out that he wasn't old enough to do it anyway. Yeah. So I was doing all this training in my suit for nothing really. But anyway, and it didn't even help me on the day because it was a freezing cold. There wasn't heat acclimatization or anything. So, but and I knew I could do better. I thought, well, if I when I finished crossed the line, I was so ecstatic. I was so pleased that I'd actually run the marathon. I'd remember seeing my brother, and eventually I met him afterwards. My teacher saying I couldn't run a marathon. I'm thinking, right, you wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to tell my teacher that I actually did the marathon. But that's another story for another podcast, really. But I thought, well, I can improve. And then although I was exhausted, I was speaking to all these other club athletes that had, they're in their 40s and 50s. Some of them, they'd gone through maybe run for 20 or 30 years, maybe run at school, in their adolescence, track and field, gone to middle distance, lost their speed, come back into running, or just continued running, wasn't competitive at 10Ks, half marathons, 10 milers, decided to enter the marathon.
Yeah.
And they're all running long distance. Dave Bedford, as you know, used to run. So after that, I just copied what he did.
200 miles a week.
Well, not quite. It was 150 miles a week.
It was a lot. I remember his biggest was 200, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. So but actually, we all copied. I copied when I was 17. I read that Greta Weitz she was 5 years older than me, I think. I read she was running 100 miles a week. So in my wisdom, I put my mileage up to 100, and actually I got injured. But we tended to copy. But then I did copy her once I got uninjured. So go on, you went and ran 100.
So I was running 15 miles from Dagenham to King's Cross in the food cash and care I was working, and then 15 miles home.
Wow.
If I had to work on a Saturday, I'd get in the train. Some days, if I worked Saturday, I might have a day off.
Yeah.
So I was running 30 miles a day. Yeah. I mean, it was a bit quicker in the morning because I had to get to work, and in the evening there was no real rush really, but it might take me. So I could run at my best, 15 miles in say 1 hour 20 minutes, but I was running an hour and 45, an hour and 50 minutes to work, and 2 hours 15 minutes on the way home. But that's steady state running, no intervals, no track work. I went to a couple of running clubs. I was almost told, what are you doing here, really? Yeah. You're training for a marathon. You haven't you haven't done 10 years of running, you just basically wasting our time really, and you don't even know what pace you can run with our running group, 3 running groups. So they put me in the fast running group, and they lost me. They deliberately tried to lose me twice. It was a well-known running club in Essex, but
and did they lose you?
they lost me several times, yeah, but I never went back, which is a shame really. But then when I actually ran in London in 83 and 84, I made a real effort towards the end to beat runners with that running club on their vests.
And did you beat them?
I did beat them, yes.
Well done. And the time with the 150 miles a week, did it reap rewards for you?
It did, yeah. I didn't get injured. It made me, so I've got a very shuffly running style. So even in my mid-20s, I look like, for want of a better word, a 70-year-old or a 75-year-old runner shuffling along. But I was running at 200 strides a minute.
Wow.
Exceptionally fast.
And you were running at 5:30 miling?
5:30, yeah, 5:29.5 to be precise.
Yeah, we're good. If we've run forever, we can translate, can't we, what a running pace is.
But yeah, so I now run in kilometers because that's what everyone else runs in.
Yes.
But interestingly, I'm now running the same pace in training for kilometers that I did in miles. So I feel that's a bit of a
that's
good. But the last 25 years, I've managed to run most Sundays or around that weekend my London marathon pace, like just over a 7-minute mile, whether it's for 1 mile or 7 miles or 10 miles, just as a sense of achievement, just to prove I can really.
Absolutely. And tell me the huge mileage, because I was a big mileage girl. I didn't go up to 150. I think my highest ever mileage week was 129. But I seemed to thrive off miles, and I'd run 100 miles a week and 90 and 80, but I didn't do the mileage you did. But how long did you continue that volume, and what happened next? Because obviously you're still competing, aren't you, Mark? So
yeah, I'm still competing. I think I ran 5 marathons in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I probably dropped my mileage down to about 75, maybe 80 miles that week, plus the marathon.
Yes.
And I've experimented, and that experimentation at high level mileage really put me in benefit for older age. It put me in benefit for helping clients in their 70s or someone new to sport. So I now look at, to answer your question in a second, I now look at the total volume or time someone runs in a week.
Okay.
So if they run 26 miles a week, for example, and they want to run a marathon, there's a dilemma there, because whatever they run that week, they're going to be running their biggest marathon week.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
So they need to taper 2 or 3 weeks before, not 2 weeks before.
Yes, absolutely. And
they still need to do the long runs,
yes,
but they still need to reduce, even if it's a 10 or 15-minute run that week, because I see people that maybe do it, they're not experienced runners. They're going to take longer than 4 hours to run the marathon. They go and do a 20 miler, have a great race, but the absorption, the adaptation takes 8 weeks for some people.
Yeah.
If that's 4 weeks before the marathon, it's too late, because they don't recover, they don't absorb, they don't get the benefit.
Yes.
And more importantly, if they're running 26 miles a week and they still go on the club on a Tuesday or Wednesday night and they still do their Friday run, it's no surprising that they didn't blow up in the 20 miler, but they blow up at 17 miles in the marathon.
Yeah.
And so it's not the pace, it's not the nutrition, it's the taper to allow the body to be rested for the marathon.
And that makes huge sense. So you've learnt this. It's really interesting. I remember reading a quote by Eric Clapton, who said, the route to wisdom is through excess, as long as you come back from it. And probably the kind of training that you did would be considered excessive by a lot of people. But actually, it's been your route to the wisdom you have as a coach, because you've got the eye. We were saying before we started recording that you've got the eye of seeing what people need and seeing what's going on in their bodies. Because did the coaching come just did you plan it, or did it just happen because you were ended up helping people?
I just like speaking to people and just like, well, maybe you should try this, and suddenly it helps. Or someone would, ask me, what do you think about this? And saying, well, actually, you're doing that plan was great. You've just told me it worked when you were 25, but now you're 53. It just doesn't work. But I was only 40 then. I couldn't really appreciate the benefit of what it's like to recover when you're 40, what it's like when you're 50, and what it's like when you're 60. So, and I learned that so I'd run 150 miles a week, Monday to Friday, have the Saturday off, okay, and then run a marathon Sunday. So I was running 176 miles that week, and that was too much.
I see, yes.
So then I realized that, and it depends what sort of person you are. I prefer to run the day before and have the rest day 2 days before. Some people benefit from a rest day on the Thursday.
Yeah.
They feel sluggish the Friday or Saturday, and they run well on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And if the race is on the Saturday, or the race is on a bank holiday Monday, you've got to really change,
of course,
the way you operate. And also, I didn't understand the stress levels of traveling.
No.
So before, didn't matter whether it was in Florida doing the marathon or whether it was in Wolverhampton, I just tapered exactly the same. And the stress level for traveling, it doesn't feel like a stress, but the fatigue, it just takes more out. So arriving early or resting up early, doing the longer run, maybe 10 days before the marathon, because then you're starting to taper a bit more before the marathon. And I started helping people, and it just became more of a hobby. People were asking me at the running clubs, and I could see I was getting this success with people that were new to sport, not getting injured. I've been doing sport a long time, and they couldn't get under 3 hours or 4 hours. And then I make 2 or 3, they might only ask me 6 weeks before. I make 2 or 3 subtle changes, and suddenly they've been running for 15 years and they have their best time. They get under 3 hours, they get under 4 hours, or especially now where they go on forums, on Strava, you download all your information. There's all this stress. When are you doing your 20 miler? And then I suddenly realized that living near Oakley, in Bedfordshire, the Oakley 20 or the Finchley 20, and as I got older, I realized that those 20 milers didn't help me in a marathon. Suddenly I had a PB 6 weeks after the marathon, or 8 weeks, but if the marathon was 4 weeks after a 20 mile, it didn't help me. Then the Oakley 20 one year was cancelled for flooding, so people turned up. Some people just went for a run, and then some people were got up at silly o'clock on the Wednesday, the week after the Oakley 20 that was cancelled, got up at 3 o'clock and went out and did 4 hours for their marathon to get to work. And they had their worst marathon because
of course,
they did it before a day's work, so they had no time to recover, put their feet up on a Sunday. Then some people went out and did the long run the week after the Oakley 20, because that was the only, and they had worse results. And some people that hadn't done the Oakley 20 or the Finchley 20 actually had their best results.
Interesting. It is interesting.
So it's about age, it's about recovery. You can still do these runs, but you've got to really treat them. Treat them with respect. With respect, because back in the 80s, we only had like a Timex watch or a Casio watch. We didn't have GPS. So we ran on time, we didn't run on distance.
Always.
Okay.
And I look back at my mileage, and actually, of course, we don't actually know what mileage we ran, because I assumed I ran a such and such mile and then just ran. Right. It's very different times, wasn't it?
And then, I used to go out and run, having run 1 hour, 48 minutes for 20 miles. So I'd always run under close to 2 hours in a training run. I'd go out and run it, come back, and even with Ordnance Servo Maps trying to use a little wheel, you couldn't really measure it back then. So then I'd go and drive it, and it would always be maybe a little bit over, but I think the car speed and distance was never accurate, really. So that was the only way you could really measure it, unless you did a running race. So I got very good at knowing that if I ran a particular effort at, say, marathon pace around, might have been 7-minute miles back then, I knew that if I ran for an hour, that'd be about 10 miles, or if I ran for 220, that'd be about 20 miles. So I got very good before. polar heart rate monitors came out back in, I think, 88, 89, one of the first ones in the UK. Then I could start really working on heart rate. And that was no GPS then. They were just pure heart rate monitors. So I got very good at understanding so I was never the fastest in a marathon. I was always shocked when I beat people. I'd always ask them, they slowed down at the end. Why did they slow down? I want to find out why they slowed down to help me, really.
Yeah, interesting.
And then they slowed down because they went off too fast. They'd done a long run the week before,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, okay, but maybe that wouldn't work for me. So I would risk a race and do what they did, and I would fail.
Yeah.
So I realised the long runs, the intervals on the Thursday night before a marathon, unless you're looking to win the marathon or looking to beat a club mate and hang on with him for 26 miles and try and beat him in the last 385 yards, there's no place for interval work, 10-second interval work, short interval work for the marathon.
Yeah,
it has to be the longer stuff.
Yeah,
But going back to the marathon, the 20-mile runs, some of the 20-mile races I did, even if the females, they closed at 2 hours 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They didn't allow people to run for 3 or 4 hours, 4.5, and that was soul destroying, really, for a lot of people.
I remember that. I remember races where the kind of trail thing was coming up behind people, but it wasn't at a very slow time at all. It wasn't. It was. So were you? When did you get led into kind of Ironman and things? It was because if you were a pure runner and obviously really keen on running, how did it branch into?
Well, I enjoyed the running, but I never won a marathon. I was always in the top 5. I was in the lead in the Basildon Marathon. I think I had about a 4-minute lead, and I was probably on schedule for about 2:44, and the record was around 2:48 at that time. So I was well inside. My capability, but they put the arrows the wrong way, so I ended up running down a lane, a no through road. So then I came back, and I was literally exhausted, just shouting to people to turn around. It's the wrong way, and one of the chaps that I called forced to use a lot of energy and adrenaline up and get him to turn around, winning, and I was 3rd or 4th. But so I got a bit disillusioned with just running marathons, really. And then there was a London tube strike at work, and I was one of the managers at work, and my manager lived in Maidstone in Kent, so he couldn't come in. So I became the key holder, and I had to get in. So I basically had to work really early, like 7 in the morning to like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So the thought of, I was always an early bird, getting up early, running to work, finishing at 9, getting home at 11, and leaving back at 4:30 in the morning. So I went to the local bike shop and bought a bike, and suddenly realised that it was a great way to cross train. So sometimes I'd, ride into work, run home that night, run back in the morning, and the extra speed I got, the distance I got, suddenly my legs started to get stronger. So I was improving my running. So it was more of a sort of cross-training thing, really. And then at weekends, instead of having the weekend off, I could go out and go cycling as well. Or if I was working early and late, I could miss the traffic on the A13. I would never dream of cycling on the A13 now, but on the dual carriageway, cycling early and come home late. And it was a great way of commuting and not having to wait 15 minutes for a train. I was getting home quicker. Then I heard about there was going to be a triathlon. It was in the Athletics Weekly magazine. There was going to be a triathlon. And then on the television, it was Julie Moss.
I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, and she dragged herself across the line. And I'm thinking, when I cross the finish line, there's always people collapse, exhausted. And I can speak for England. I've got lots of energy afterwards. I thought, well, I wonder if it'd be amazing to actually swim, cycle, and run. The only problem is I couldn't swim, and I had a fear of open water. So, but unfortunately, the first triathlon in the UK was an open water swim at Reading.
Yeah, I remember.
It was in a lakes, non-wetsuit swim. Wetsuits weren't allowed. Yeah. So I went to some swimming clubs and tried to get some coaching. I went on a triathlon coaching day, and even the cyclists there, I was as strong as them. I could stay with them. We went round have you ever been to the running track at Reading? Have you?
Yes.
Oh, there's a velodrome. There's a velodrome as well.
Yeah, probably when people say a town or a place, I've usually done something running
At the
wise.
running track. Yeah.
Yes.
So there was a running track and a velodrome all in one, really. So we went there and we cycled, ran, and I was pretty competent on the bike. I was only 22 and a half, so still young, but still marathon fit. No one could live with me on the run. I was just I was by far the strongest runner. Even getting off the bike, I was quicker than some of the people that were running fresh. But my swimming was horrendous. They put me in the tadpole lane. I could barely swim a length. I was out of breath. My technique was, and I thought, so I just had to take lessons. I got there was no triathlon coaches. There was no open to swim coaches. It was just swim 25 meters, rest 25 meters back. When you could do 2 lengths, it was 50 meters, and that was it, really. There was no real technique. There was no technique for someone that's aerobically fit but's got poor technique. Normally they get your fitness first and then it's the technique. So my legs were very dense from running, so they were sinking all the time. I did the first triathlon in Reading, absolutely loved it. I was, I think, 4th or 5th from last coming out of the swim. Overtook probably 80 to 100 on the bike, overtook, and it was a 13-mile run rather than the traditional 10K. So overtook lots on the run, finished 8th overall, and thought, wow.
Yeah,
sense of achievement I got overtaking once I come out of the water was, and I just kept improving my swimming, really, and eventually managed to do Ironman triathlons all around the world.
Well, this is the thing, doing from not being able to swim to, is it 2.4 miles an Ironman?
Yeah, it is.
Yes. So it's 2.4 miles, 112 cycling and a marathon.
Yeah, like all great things, it was discovered in a bar. They couldn't decide who was the fittest. The kayaker, lucky it wasn't kayaking as well, but who was it? The swimmer that could swim the 2.4 miles the Waikiki beach? Was it the 112-mile cycle race, or was it the Honolulu Marathon? So they decided to put them all together.
I didn't know that. So your swimming, has it got as good as your cycling and running, or did it?
My running was by far my strongest. So if it was a 400 in a race, I'd be maybe 50 or 100 out the swim.
Right.
5 on the bike. I often had the fastest run, even though I was exhausted after the first 2. But with swimming, you don't tend to slow down as much over the years. You can improve your technique, better wetsuits. So swimming is so I would often be 1st, 2nd, or 3rd in the over 60 age group in the swim, and be in the top 5% in the swim overall, which back then I'd have won triathlons if it had been that good. My cycling technology is better. I can pace myself better. I do lots of training, heart rate monitoring, polar and power meters. So my cycling is very, very strong despite being small. But my running is not as good now, purely because I'm an hour slower than I was. Really at my best. Running seems to decline a lot quicker than the other 2 sports, really. So it's weird now. I'm coming out high up in the swim overall, or in my age group, doing well on the bike. Getting caught by runners, but they're all younger runners. They're not runners of my age, because I'm still pretty competent with the running. So I've always set myself ambitions, really. For 30 years of running, I could always get under 20 minutes for 5K. So 2021, 22, I ran a sub 20-minute 5K. So I've managed to run a sub 20-minute 5K for 5 different decades now.
Wow. So you're running it now. You're still under 20 minutes now.
I ran 22:16 last weekend, but I'm not going full gas because I've got the marathon coming up.
Okay.
But on a fast course, when I've rested up, I feel confident I can get close to 20, or if not under 20. So I've run a sub 20-minute in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and now my 60s.
Wow.
So whether I can stay injury free, and I still think there's a little bit left. I can still squeeze out a bit more from that 1935 to get under 20 minutes when I'm in my 70s, really.
Oh yeah. Well, it's fun, isn't it? It's a fun thing to run in every decade. I'm interested, how many Ironman triathlons did you say you've done?
I've done 44 Ironman triathlons, 535 triathlons in general. Again, with just like the marathon, always had lots of energy at the end. I've paced myself, got my nutrition right, and I've passed that on to my clients, really, how to you know, to have the most amazing experience.
Yeah.
And when I've finished my Ironmans, I've always lots of energy left. And, you know, if it was a disco in the evening, I'll be on the dance floor dancing away. But I couldn't go any faster. So then I heard about the double Ironman. So I did a double Ironman, and then I did a triple Ironman, which is 11K swim, 540K bike with no stopping, no sleeping, and then a triple marathon.
And how long did that take?
That took me 45 hours, 59 minutes, and 29 grueling seconds.
And no sleeping?
No stopping, no. I just stopped once because I had a puncture. And you stop between the swim and the bike. But even the swim and the bike, maybe 6 or 8 minutes, completely changing all your clothes, take your wetsuit off, put new clean, dry cycling clothes on, do the cycle with a nice chamois for 336 miles, get off and run a triple marathon, really.
And you eat, I take it.
Yes, you eat, but then the issue there, you're getting flavour fatigue. You couldn't possibly do it with gels. You couldn't do it with you have real food, sandwiches, flapjacks, baby food.
Yeah.
Back then I was using rather than make my own baby food that would, well, not baby food, but
yeah,
liquid food, but have a whole host of things: savoury foods, sweet foods, bland foods, rice cakes. You know, not necessarily just bananas. You as soon as you get flavour fatigue, you stop eating, and once you eat, it's a downward spiral.
Problem, yeah. And so, just I mean, we ought to stop soon, because as I said to you, I kind of make these about half an hour, but I'm so intrigued and I so love talking to you. I have got to ask you, how have you managed to keep injury free and vibrant like you are now? Because we are talking 5 decades of running, 4 decades of running.
Yeah. Well, so I ran on Christmas Day, 1918. I've run on Christmas Day ever since. So it's 44 Christmas days, 44 years of running.
Yeah.
It's listening to my body, really.
Right.
A niggle becomes an ache, becomes an injury.
Yeah.
Most people get an injury, and that keeps reoccurring, or they overcompensate, and something else happens.
Yeah.
So I've always been good at listening to my body, being a wuss, really, or just being over wary of what is happening.
I love this. I love the description of a wuss. So someone who's just told us he did a triple Ironman and used to run 150 miles a week. I wouldn't describe you as a wuss, Mark.
Okay, but it's listening to my body and basically often
being
the week after a marathon, I recover. I don't run the week after a marathon or a 24-hour track race or a 100K race. I have that week. I might cross train, and I always have 4 weeks off at the end of the season.
Right. Yeah.
From hardly any structured training, just training and when more rest days, and then I find that gets me going for I want to get back into sport.
Yeah.
It's only 4 weeks. I'd rather have 4 weeks off, controlled, fit and healthy, let my body recover, and then lots of rest, eat healthily, try and be relaxed and try and get quality of sleep. And that's put me in good stead. And look, speaking to people that I know that have been running for 20, 30 or 40 years, they all have traits of what I've got, really. It's
interesting.
Because we've only got one body. You can't really, it's not like changing your running shoes when they split. And I'm looking forward to trying the more new carbon shoes out, just to see if they can actually take up a lot of that shock and give me a bit more spring in my step, really.
Yeah. Something I'm also interested in is, are you now full-time coaching people, or you're not having to work and coach, or are you doing both?
No, so I coach full-time. That can be anyone from couch to 5K to running a 24-hour track race, to do a triathlon, I've done marathon to Saab, I've done London Marathon 9 times, so it could be just going faster, it could just be injury prevention. So I tend to pick clients. I always speak to someone first before we work together, try and understand what makes them tick, what style of coaching they want. So that can be, I speak to them at least once a week, most of my clients, on the phone, WhatsApp, Zoom, FaceTime, and just give them the knowledge that they need to have confidence in my coaching system. Generally, I prefer if they're not on social media too much, because they tend to get bogged down with what someone else is doing.
Yeah.
Information I'm giving them, it's not cut and paste, it's unique to them.
Yeah, of
And
course.
some of the amazing stories that I've got, friends for life, been invited to weddings, I get a text every year or a message or a WhatsApp video every year. Do you remember on this day you helped me in the London Marathon? Or do you remember you helped me in London to Brighton or whatever it was, swimming the Serpentine swim? So, for me, that is it's full-time helping people, sense of achievement. And some people I've had a text 11 years running from just helping them. And I think it's life changing. I never realized it was life changing. I was just giving them a training plan, helping them with their nutrition, helping them be calm, not get nervous before the race. And
it was in you, Mark, because it was your very first marathon. Even though you were really, really exhausted, your spirit was that you wanted to help the zigzaggy man. So
yeah.
it's simply in you from the very beginning to want to help people. And then it was a natural evolution into coaching, wasn't it? People came to you.
Yeah, people come to me really, and just because I believe I'm quite approachable. A coach needs to listen, as you know, you need to listen first, and then and with my experience, I can ask the right questions.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you ask the right. Most athletes, clients, they have the answers.
Yeah.
I get the answers out of them by asking them the right questions.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. And so where can you be found? Obviously, I'll put the links and everything in the description below. So if someone wants to come and be coached by you, what happens? Is it just if I put your website link? Is that the way?
Yeah, put the web. So it's I Make Coaching is my main coaching website. There's lots of information, 800,000 words on my website, imake.co.uk. You can follow Mark Kleanthous on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, X, or various other social media places.
And find you if they need some help, because
Yeah.
clearly you've got a depth of knowledge that's beyond a lot of people because of your own experiences and because of that eye that you've got, because you can see what's needed. So that makes such a difference.
Yeah, I think I'm very privileged to be able to, when I see a runner, I can give them some technique work to prevent injury or make them run injury free, or just feel a lot, or lower their heart rate, or just generally do that. I can sometimes sense before a race, I might go up to someone and say, what time are you hoping to do? And I know they look really nervous, they look sick and ill, and I just calm them down, saying, look, it's even if you're doing it for charity, it's all about enjoying it, pacing yourself. If you've got a niggle, don't necessarily go off with a pacemaker that you plan. Just and if you feel good at the end, do that. And I get people come up to me now that I don't really recognize. They probably don't recognize me. I had a lot more, and they say, "Do you remember me in such and such marathon? We were running along, and you gave me advice." Or after the race, I went back and sort of cheered people on and told them to change their arm action, and it made a big difference. And
you're a gift. You're a gift to sport, Mark. It's amazing.
Thank you.
No, you really are. And I'm delighted. I've never forgotten our meeting in that hotel. It was such fun. And I would like to also obviously continue this conversation at another time. So we can have you as a regular, and also I'd love to find you in an event so that we can
Yes.
see you.
It'd be great to run together or do something together.
Yeah, exactly. So we will do that.
So so I'm running in the London Marathon this year. So that's 25 years after the first time, the last time. So yeah,
well done.
And my ambition we're not live still, are we?
Yes, we are.
All right. My ambition is to be the last runner still running. So I've kept that under the radar because I want to.
Well, now it's open. Now it's out in the world. We're still on air. Well, anything last words before we do stop recording?
Right. Anything is possible if you put your mind to it. It may not be possible in 6 months' time, but have a long-term strategy, prevent injuries, I enjoy the journey far more than I enjoy the race or the finish line. So it's all about enjoying the journey, learning as much as you can. Every day's a school day. Learn what you possibly can from the nutrition, your sweat rate, your heart rate. Don't get besotted with gadgets. Running on feeling is the most important thing that anyone can take away from this podcast, really.
Thank you, Mark. It's been such a joy, such a joy.
Okay, I'll see you at the races then.
Yeah, I'll see you at see you at the races.